In life, we all encounter obstacles, and those obstacles come in all different shapes, sizes, and forms. The question is, how do we handle those obstacles? Do we attack them head on, or do we allow them to make us quit? Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up on themselves, their dreams, or their goals. We will interview successful people from all walks of life as they share their no-quit stories when they had the choice to give up or give in, but they didn't. We thank you for listening, and we hope to be that jolt of positivity as you go for your greatness. Welcome to episode number 122 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is tenacious. Our quote of the day comes to us from Steve Ballmer. It's how tenacious you are that will determine your success. It is my privilege to bring you today's episode. Our guest shares her story about how she used the toughest year of her life to positively change herself into the woman she is today. When the going got tough, Courtney Amburg realized that nobody was going to do it for her, and she decided that she needed to take action. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Courtney, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Chris.
I appreciate it. So the first question we ask everybody is, are you ready to make it happen today?
I am always ready to make it happen.
I'm pretty sure I knew that would be your answer. So the number one question and the number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never give up. And I was curious if you had either a personal story about perseverance or perhaps a challenging time that tested you and you could have given up or given in, but you didn't.
Yeah. This might be a little different than a lot of other people have shared, but I went through probably the hardest year of my life thus far. I'm sure there'll be harder times coming, but it was like a perfect storm of everything that life can kind of throw at you that you don't really have too much control over, where I suffered from depression for a little over a year. So I lost my grandfather, who was basically the only male figure in my life who helped raise me. Then on top of it, it was like my freshman year of college. I was thrown into a city that I've never lived in a city before, surrounded by all these people, but never felt more alone in my whole entire life. Had a hard time making friends. And it was during that year that I realized I was there for art, right? That art was not my calling, that I needed to do something drastically different. And I was also going through my first breakup with basically like the first love of my life. So it was like this perfect storm, and I was severely depressed, and my family and my friends were all trying to get me help, but I just like lost like my love for life, and I didn't care about anything. And after about a year, I was kind of like, what am I doing? Where am I going? And I wanted to be a better version of myself. And I kind of started to come to this realization that I needed to do something and that nobody could do that for me. And that I honestly had the power to mold, to shift, and to change my own circumstances and how I see the world. And that's kind of where I started. Of course, I went to therapy, but also that mindset shift is something that I'm so grateful for, that I went through that I persevered through that, and that now I come out of that. And you know, when anything goes right or anything goes wrong, I blame it on myself, and I look at where do I have control or power over the situation? How can I look at this differently, that it's benefiting me, or that I can learn, or that I can grow from that?
I appreciate you touching that for a minute. And I think it's interesting. There's a former Navy SEAL by the name of David Goggins, and he often touches on what you shared, which is he realized at some point that no one was going to do it for him. And obviously you realized, even though you had family and friends that were helping you, and it's something that we talk about quite often on our show, is you can't do something for somebody else. Now, you can help them, you can try to inspire them, you can try to lead them in the right direction, but it has to be ultimately that person themselves that want to do it. And we have a lot of coaching clients that we'll sit down with, and sometimes it gets to the point where you just say, you know what, we'd love to work with you, but right now you're not ready. And it's not a bad thing, it's just you need to be ready. So I got to ask you, during those times when obviously you said you went to therapy and things like that, was there anything in addition to that you were reading or putting in front of your mind or your eyes or doing that helped you stay focused and make that change? And as you mentioned, the mind shift change.
Yeah. Well, first, that is so true what you just touched on. Like, that is 100% the truth. Besides, because I originally, on a little bit of a tangent, my mom kind of dragged me to go see a therapist, and I just wasn't ready, right? And I like threw this big tantrum. I was like screaming at her. And then, you know, fast forward 6 months, I was asking to go. So like, you're completely right that you have to be ready for the change. and take responsibility for that. But the other piece, so I just kind of became pretty obsessed with like self-help. So not only that, but I was like reading Into the Wild, which was a book that helped change my life, about this guy who's kind of, making his own path, and he ends up passing away because he made some poor decisions. But that kind of led me down the route of self-help and reading books and listening to podcasts and really trying to surround the things that I was putting into my mind with positive, stuff that you put out there, right? That is going to help me change the way that I perceive myself and the world around me in a better way.
No, that's awesome, and I think it's so true. Is you have to be ready, and obviously you just mentioned yourself that your mom was trying to bring you, and you were, screaming and basically fighting back. But then you fast forward 6 months, and you were ready to go. It's interesting how that mind changes, and all of a sudden, when you have that switch in your mind or that mind shift change, then all of a sudden the actions step up as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, Courtney, if you wouldn't mind just telling our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you're doing today.
So I'm, the big broad word is I'm a coach. My specialty is fitness and nutrition. So I do a lot of in-home personal training. I do a little bit of small group training, but I also have started to branch out more into nutrition. So I have 2 nutrition certifications, which classify me as a nutrition coach. So I've been doing that with one-on-one settings, but now I've actually started to branch out because I want to help more people live better lives, feel better, right? Stop starving themselves into skinny or into whatever body that isn't necessarily going to continue to be that way with the way that they're going about it. So I've started an online business where I now kind of do nutrition coaching virtually.
No, it's interesting. And I think that's a trend in that industry, is that there's a lot of opportunities to do some of those things virtually. And there's a lot of opportunity to connect with people, because it used to be back in the day, not only for the actually working out component where you had to physically be in front of somebody. But I think it's really interesting because some people do workouts in their own house and things. So I think for you, obviously, you're right on top of it, because there's going to be changes in that industry as well. And I think the nutrition goes obviously hand in hand with the health. So I think obviously you've touched on both of those, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, I have a lot of fun. It's amazing what simple nutritional strategies can do for people, and not just like physically, because that's great, but like energy and sleep and like how they look at themselves and all the different biofeedbackers that have to do with health.
It's interesting that you said simple, because I think a lot of people, and I'm not an expert in nutrition or health, so this is not from a medical perspective, but I feel that so many of my friends and people that I know that have made specific changes in their life, whether it's losing a significant amount of weight or becoming much more healthy as they get a little bit older, what a lot of them have basically said is that they just took some of the most basic and simple things and just consistently stuck with them. So I think that's one of the misconceptions, and I'm curious to get your perspective of health, is that a lot of people, I think, over create issues and make it way more difficult than it should be. Yeah,
I would completely agree. I think I have a lot of thoughts about this, but from what I have experienced from my close to 10 years of working with clients in the gym and out of the gym, is that sometimes they think that to feel the way that they want to feel, which is the most important part, right? To feel confident, to, feel okay, like in that pair of jeans or in your bikini, and like be able to like eat and like have that balance where you can go out and have pizza with your kids and you're not like basically starving yourself or always having to be the person that says no to like social events, is you're not going to necessarily look like the person on the magazine, right? The fitness magazine, which is just one day that they've peaked to. They don't even look like that most of the time. But in order to find that balance of health and wellness and satisfaction, that it's a lot smaller changes than people think. So it could be basically like making sure you have protein in every meal that is around the same size as your palm. It could be making sure you're drinking water. It could be making sure you're getting 8 hours of sleep as best you can, right? Really small, simple changes make like common sense stuff that your grandmother and your mother probably is always harping on you, like eat your veggies, really does work. And why I've created like the 8-week nutrition course is to teach people, because we all know what to do, but it's to help teach people learn how to implement them into their lifestyles in a way that is so easy and conducive and like just fits perfectly and naturally that they can do that for the rest of their lives.
No, I appreciate you touching on that, because I think that's something that is interesting. Is one of the things we talk about is being 1 degree away from your greatness. And the reason we say it that way is, just like you mentioned a couple seconds ago, it's those little changes consistently done make and have huge results. So I'm glad you touched on that.
Yeah, that is like one of my favorite principles. I first learned Kaizen. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Training for Warriors uses it a lot, and it's basically like get 1% better every single day in something. So maybe you completely failed on the food side today, but like you can get a little bit better at something else somewhere else. And if you're always progressing, like you're going to be 300 times better at the end of the year.
No, I love that. And a lot of the sales coaching that we do, we have a little different spin to that is people typically start a year or a sales cycle and they have these large goals. And let's say it's 5 or 6 or 10 or 12% increase in sales. That's pretty daunting. But one of the things we talk about is what if you could make a 1% change 1% increase each month? And most people say, oh, I could do that. Yeah. So I say, okay, if you do 1%, that's at the end of the year, that's a 12% increase. And what if you had 1 or 2 months where you did 2% as opposed to 1%? And when you break it down into those pieces and bite-sized pieces, I think people are able to really grasp onto it. So speaking of 1%, I wanted to ask you, how do you personally define success?
I think success is like a perfect blend of feeling like you're happy with what you're doing and that you're making progress to where you want to go. Because from a personal standpoint, and a lot of seeing what I do with coaching clients is you'll get to that goal you set, but oftentimes we don't even pat ourselves on the back. Like there's always this next mountain. So for me, it's like, are you enjoying the process? Because there's always going to be another piece that you're going to define yourself as being successful or as getting to where you want to be or getting that goal. So finding that kind of place where you can enjoy the process, where you can be happy and you know that you're growing every single day, I think you're successful already.
That's a perfect definition of success. So I wanted to ask you, and I'm curious if your answer is, if you had to define yourself in one word, what would that word be?
This was really hard. And I actually had to ask some people to like, what do you think you would define me as? And the word that kept coming up was tenacious. So I guess I would also agree with that.
That's a pretty good word. And I think just knowing you as I do, I would definitely say that's probably pretty accurate in many ways.
Yeah, thanks.
So one of the things we look to do, which with each and every episode, is to add value. And I was curious if you had either a morning or a daily ritual that you swear by has helped you become as successful as you are.
I honestly am so super intrigued by like the morning rituals. A lot of coaches that I follow and mentors that I follow, they have this morning ritual, but I find, and for a while I kept like kind of getting down on myself is because I wouldn't put in or wouldn't be able to keep this morning ritual. Because my schedule is just so crazy with training. So some days I'm up at like 5 a.m. and other days that same day I might not get home until 9:30 and then I have to get back up at 6 and then other days I don't train till 3. So because my schedule is so scattered and I'm still a very like sleep prioritizing person, like that has to happen 8 to 9 hours a night. I don't necessarily have a morning routine, but I do have like 3 cornerstone things that I try to do every day. And that is, break a sweat, even if that's for 10 minutes. And even if it's just like a little bit of light sweat on my brow. Then the second one would be to put at least 15 to 30 minutes of some type of positive information or studying in. So whether that's honing in on my craft when it comes to nutrition or fitness, or that's listening to a podcast like yours, where I'm learning what other people are doing or trying to view things a little bit differently from, other people's perspective. And the last piece is I try to like make some type of space. So now that the weather is nicer, I'm not a cold person, so I haven't been doing this. But since it's kind of broken, I like to at least go on like a 15-minute walk, shoes off, bare feet, no phone with me, no music, but just like walking outside and like being with my thoughts and like getting the fresh air and like listening to my surroundings and kind of connecting that way is something that I found it really kind of helps me, feel content and be creative with my business.
No, that's great that you touch on that. And it's interesting because knowing your business, I have a lot of friends that are in a similar industry, not doing exactly the same thing, but coaching crazy hours. And I think it's difficult to always have that morning ritual, especially in your field. And one of my best friends literally trains sometimes from 4 a.m. till clients, so he can't always do it. But I think all the successful people that we've had on our show, they have some type of daily or morning ritual that they stick to. And I love the way that you mentioned 3 cornerstones, because I think obviously you've been successful and you're going to continue to be even more successful. And you have these 3 cornerstones. And I think 2 of them, I knew one of them without you answering would be some type of workout just because of what field you're in. But the other 2, I think, are even more interesting because they're mind focused improving some type of area, whether it's studying, whether it's positivity. But the other component you mentioned is taking that time for yourself. And the best part about that I liked personally and took away is you have no phone and no music. And I think in today's day and age with technology, it's almost like people put their phone down, and if they put it down for more than 2 or 3 minutes, it's almost like they have this anxiety. So I think that's great. And hopefully some of our listeners will maybe take some of that advice and maybe put their phones down. Or one of the things I try to do very often during the day is put my phone on actual airplane mode. So even if I think, or if I want to pick up my phone, I can pick it up. But then I remind myself, because I see that non-connection on the top, is that, okay, keep the phone down.
Yeah. And that probably is also great for productivity too. So you don't have your phone dinging constantly, pulling your attention away when you're trying to like really get stuff done.
No question. So I wanted to ask, one of the things we often talk on, not every show, but is we have different quotes. And I was curious if you have a favorite quote yourself.
I do have a favorite quote, and I was torn with if I was going to share this one or if I was going to go with more of like a PG friendly one. But I feel like this is the one that I kind of like gauge my life by. And it's by Frank Zappa, actually. He said, if you end up with a boring, miserable life, it was because you listened to your mom, your dad, your teacher, your priest, some random person on television telling you exactly how to do your shit. Then you kind of deserved it. And it kind of always ties back for me back to like following my intuition, doing what's going to make me happy, because in the end of the day, like that's all that matters. And that's how I'm going to help make other people around me happy, is if I feel like I'm successful with the way that we defined it earlier.
No, that's a great quote, and I have not heard that one before, so I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah.
So, assuming you could go back and give the 20-year-old version of yourself only one piece of advice, what would that advice be?
I probably would tell myself to follow and listen to my instincts and my intuition a lot more. I've had 3 or 4 instances where my gut was telling me something, and I did what my brain told me to do instead of my gut, and it kind of got me into a pickle or not so great of a situation. And now, I'd probably tell myself to listen to that more often than not. And even if everyone's telling you that that's not what you should quote unquote be doing, follow your instincts anyway, because it's going to be what's best for you.
No, that's great advice that I think probably everybody has had multiple times during their life, where they were thinking something and maybe listening to somebody else and really not listening to themselves. So I think that's definitely some good advice, and I probably could have listened to that when I was 20 myself.
Yeah.
So if you could have dinner with anybody, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
I was torn. So I'm torn between like this guy, Chris McCandless, I think is how you say his name. And he was about the book Into the Wild. That's who the book is written about. Or my grandfather. So my grandfather passed away when just before I graduated high school, and we were like best friends. But as you get older, it's like harder. You become a teenager. You're like too cool, or like you just get weird. I kind of wish I had like one more 4 or 5 hours with him, so I could like learn everything I possibly could about his life and like any wisdoms he had to impart, and just kind of like get that final like connection that, you always wish you had.
No, it's interesting because that question always leads to typically somebody similar to like what you talked about, who wrote or the book was written about, Into the Wild. And then a lot of times people touch on either a grandparent or a father or mother or uncle or aunt, somebody that they wish that they got a chance to spend some more time with. So I love that question because it really opens up and it makes people think. And that's the best, I think, part of that question is it's not always just a yes or no answer. And it's usually that there's a reason for it behind it. So I appreciate you touching on that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good question.
So here might be a different question for you. Is there anything that you wish you knew 5 years ago?
That I wish I knew 5 years ago. I wish I knew that I would still be as passionate as I am about my, where I am, about this business, about this space, fitness and nutrition. And I wish that I would have known that it's going to be okay. And that though it's scary now and you don't know if you're going to be able to pay your bills, but like keep learning, keep grinding, put as much into it, stop looking everywhere else. And just like, you're supposed to do this, just make it happen kind of a thing. I think I probably would have told myself that 5 years ago, and that would have really helped. No,
I think we all have those things that you kind of wish you knew, but then the reality is you might not be here. So I'm sure you might have wished that you knew that, but you've been successful, and you're going to be successful without being able to tell yourself that 5 years ago.
That's very true.
So it might be a tough question, and I ask this to a lot of people, and some people have quick answers and some people have to think about it, but what do you think is the best advice you've ever received?
Best advice I probably have ever received was show your vulnerability with people. I definitely was the type of person where I didn't know that this was the case, but I've had a lot of people approach me in the past, tell me that, you come off like superhuman or superhero, or that you've nothing, you're always eating right and you're always doing what you should be doing, that you never like question your confidence and stuff like that. And during those times, that's when I was questioning all of those things and really slacking with all of those things the most. And the second I kind of started showing people like, listen, I'm just like you, like, I feel like the better connection I have with my coaching clients, I feel like the better I'm able to help and serve people. But I guess it's just kind of scary, like showing people that, you too also don't have it figured out or have it all together. But hey, I can still help you. Do you know what I mean? I think that was hard at first, but I definitely would have loved to open up a little bit sooner, because I think it would have helped more people.
I love that you are that candid to share that. I appreciate that. I've been very vulnerable in the last few months, been going through some stuff in my life, and it's because of the fact that I've been vulnerable. Some people that I've created some really cool relationships, some special new friendships, and I think I have a tough exterior in some ways, as I think everybody does, and I think it's a defense mechanism. And I think if you take down that wall a little bit, and it's not to the extent where you let everybody in, just anybody and everybody, but if you take down that wall a little bit, people realize that, wow, this person, he or she, they're a little bit more real than I thought. And I think that's the best part of social media, as well as the worst part is a lot of times people just see the absolute best and they don't see some of those vulnerable positions. And I think that's interesting that you touched on that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I feel like the second you also become a little bit more vulnerable, the better all of your relationships around you become. So that's always something that I feel like people always want, right? They want better connection with other people.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I think when you take that wall down a little bit, people are more open to not only seeing you, but the flip side is they're also more open to being a little bit more vulnerable themselves as well.
Yeah, I agree.
So we're going to switch gears here to what we call the hot seat questions. And the only request we have is that you spit out the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay, I'm up for the challenge.
All right. So this might be a tough first question because you're in the nutrition and health field, but assuming you had one last meal and you could choose absolutely anything for it, what would it be?
I probably would want margarita pizza, and I would want mint chocolate chip ice cream.
Awesome. You rock. If you had
the same meal.
Awesome. If you had thrown out like a protein shake or egg whites, I would have been really upset.
Oh, hell no. No, definitely not.
Awesome. All right. Favorite sport?
Lacrosse.
Favorite team?
The Wings, which is, I don't even know if they still play anymore, but they used to play box lacrosse for Philadelphia, and I used to have season tickets. That would be my favorite team.
Favorite smell?
Basil. Fresh basil.
Fresh all-time favorite movie?
That's a hard one. I'm like torn between Lord of the Rings. Let's just go with Lord of the Rings. Let's just go with that.
I definitely did not expect that coming.
Oh, I'm like a huge nerd. Like I read all the books, Harry Potter's, like we Game of Thrones, read them. Like let's go. We can nerd out all day.
Nerd out all day. Love it. All right. All-time favorite book?
Probably Into the Wild. That was like the first book that really kind of helped change my mindset in my life.
Favorite singer or band?
Currently or all time?
Your call.
All right. Currently it's Cardi B. I'm really big into like hip hop and rap. So she's on repeat right now.
And all time?
All time, I probably would say the band Brand New. Definitely an all time favorite.
And if you were in a foxhole and you could only have one person to have your back, who would it be and why?
I probably would pick my best friend Jaina, because she is down to get into any crazy situation with me. And yeah, she's down for whatever.
She sounds like trouble.
She is trouble. She really is.
Okay, so I wanted to ask if you wouldn't mind telling our listeners a little bit about some of those programs. And I know you mentioned your 8-week program and anything else that you have going on or coming out you'd like to mention or tell our listeners about.
Yeah, of course. I love to share. So I have my cornerstone program. It's called 8-Week Nutrition. You can find that at the number 8weeknutrition.com. And it's technically a 9-week course where I take you week by week through all of the foundational habits that anyone who has lost weight and kept it off, that's the main point, kept it off, sustained that weight loss, learn, know, and implement for the rest of their lives. So it's me teaching you how you can do the things that you already know you should be doing, but how to make it so that it doesn't feel like work after the 8 weeks. And then I also do one-on-one nutrition coaching. So you can kind of apply to that at my website at CourtneyAmburgFitness.com. And that's more for people who are looking for, like, are you suffering with, energy issues or immune stuff, things that you just really kind of feel like crap. And you're like, I've tried all medicine. I don't want to be on medication, because I'm a big believer that, food is medicine. And we kind of go through step by step to make you feel, the best that you can for individualized nutrition.
No, that's really interesting. And I like when you talk about results and keeping it off, because I think that's the most important part, is making changes and then making changes that stick.
Yeah, what's the point of going through all that work if you're just going to put it back on in a couple months? Like, it's pointless.
So before we let you go, I wanted to ask if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners.
I think I would say, you know what you need to do, you know what you should do, just do it, right? That fear that is telling you that, you shouldn't, or all the things that are going to go wrong, is just basically telling you that you need to take more action. Stop thinking, start doing, and you'll figure it out along the way.
I love it. I love that advice. And then last question is, for our listeners that would like to connect with you or follow you, what's the best way for them to do so?
For sure. I'm on Facebook. So if you just search Courtney Amburg Fitness on Facebook, you can find me there. And then I'm on Instagram, Courtney Amburg. That's a little mix of, what I do and myself personally on Instagram.
Well, listen, Courtney, I really appreciate you spending some time with us today. I'm sure you'll go out and finish another 2 or 10 workouts before or after the show's over. But thank you for being candid with us and sharing what you did.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was awesome. I'm honored that you have me.
Thank you for listening to episode number 122. Courtney is a very dynamic individual that is all about delivering results for both herself as well as her clients. When I asked her the best advice she ever received, she mentioned the importance of showing your vulnerability with people. She was very vulnerable on today's episode, and I think that is why she's able to connect so well with both her clients as well as other people. Courtney also discussed her morning routine and how she does not use her phone or listen to music, and how she focuses on some type of space. That is something that I'm personally trying to do, but it is much easier said than done. Courtney mentioned how she was very intrigued and how she became very intrigued with self-help, and how she aims today to get 1% better every single day at something. In her closing remarks, she shared advice that our No Quit tribe has definitely heard before, but is something I feel we can always benefit from hearing again. She said that we all know what we need to do and what we should do. What we should do is just go ahead and take action. So my question to our listeners today is twofold and very candid. What do you need to do? And if you haven't done something about it or taken some specific action towards that one thing you need to do, how come? Don't make excuses and don't give yourself reasons or justify your lack of action. Decide right now what it is that you need to do. You know what you need to do, and just go ahead and take that first step. Take action and go for your greatness. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.